My name is Isabella, and the night my life fractured started like any ordinary family dinner, with the smell of roast drifting through the air and soft laughter bouncing off the walls. Martine, my fiancé of 3 years, sat beside me, smiling like the world was ours and nothing could touch us. I thought I was safe. I thought I belonged. Then Valentina stood up. She didn't hesitate. She didn't falter. Her smile was too perfect, too victorious. "I have something to announce," she said, reaching for his hand. Not mine. My chest tightened so fast it felt like my ribs might crack. "I'm pregnant." The room erupted. Applause, hugs, tears of joy. My mother clutched Martine like he had just saved the world. My father's laughter echoed, as he told everyone how proud he was of this beautiful couple. And not a single person looked at me. Not one. I might as well have been invisible. I tried to breathe, but the air had left my lungs. I wanted to scream, to grab Martine and remind him that we had a life together. I wanted to yell at Valentina for smiling like she'd won something I had lost. But I couldn't. Instead, I forced my legs to move and walked out before I collapsed entirely. Outside, the street was cold and merciless. My hands trembled as I pressed them to my face, trying to make sense of the betrayal. That's when I saw him. Diego, the man Valentina had been obsessed with since we were teenagers. The man who had quietly confessed his feelings for me years ago, when I was too loyal, too blinded by my own guilt to take a chance. He didn't say a word at first. He just stood there under the yellow streetlight, calm, steady, like he knew the storm I was trapped in better than I did. And then he stepped forward, his eyes locking with mine, and something inside me snapped. I realized I wasn't invisible. Not to him, not anymore. But just as I opened my mouth, ready to speak, to confess the whirlwind of humiliation, heartbreak, and rage that had consumed me, a car screeched around the corner, headlights cutting through the night. And in that light, I saw movement, someone coming, someone who should not have been here. And my stomach dropped, because this person was about to change everything. I didn't go home that night. I wandered the streets, trying to outrun the laughter and applause that still echoed in my head. Every step reminded me of what I had lost. 3 years with Martin, every plan we'd made, every quiet promise he'd whispered. Valentina had stolen it all. And the worst part? Everyone had cheered her on. Diego followed me at a distance, silent but steady. I knew he was there. I could feel it, but I refused to look back. I wasn't ready to face anyone, not even the one person who made me feel like I might still matter. My chest ached, my legs burned, but I kept moving, because standing still would mean letting this moment define me forever. Eventually, I paused under the flickering streetlight at the corner where Diego always waited as a kid. The same corner where we had built cardboard forts and dreamed of impossible futures. I turned, finally, and he was there, calm and unwavering, his hands tucked into his pockets like he had known I would need him. "You okay?" he asked quietly, his voice cutting through the chaos inside me. I shook my head, tears spilling before I could stop them. They all forgot I exist," I whispered. Diego stepped closer, tilting his head. "Not me," he said simply, and for the first time since the announcement, I believed it. But then I saw her, Valentina, across the street, talking to someone in her phone. She was smiling, perfectly composed, unaware that I had escaped. And a cold dread settled over me. She wasn't done. She never would be. And that's when I realized, if I wanted to reclaim what was mine, I couldn't do it by yelling or fighting. I had to be smarter. I had to plan. I had to wait. Because when she least expected it, I was going to take everything back. And the thought of her face when it happened, it made my heart race in a way fear never had. The next few days passed in a blur of quiet anger and restless nights. I stayed out of the house, avoided my family's questions, and kept my distance from Martine, who seemed oblivious to the devastation he had caused. Every time I closed my eyes, I could still hear the clapping, see the tears, and feel the weight of everyone ignoring me. It was a wound I couldn't let go, and I realized I didn't want to. Not yet. Diego found me again that evening. He didn't force me to talk, didn't try to pull me into explanations. He simply handed me a cup of coffee and sat across from me on the bench, where we used to plan our imaginary empires as kids. Silence hung between us, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was safe. For the first time in days, I could breathe. "You know," he said finally, tracing the rim of his cup, "you don't have to face this alone." I wanted to laugh, bitter and shaky. "I don't even know what facing this alone looks like," I admitted. Diego smiled faintly, eyes steady and unshakable. "You're stronger than you think. You just don't know it yet." I wanted to believe him, wanted to let go of the fury building inside me. But every time I thought of Valentina smiling like a queen over my ruined life, my fists clenched. and I knew I couldn't forgive. Not now, not ever. And that's when the first spark of the plan began. Not loud, not dramatic, quiet, precise. I would rebuild myself, not for revenge yet, but for power. I would take back control of my life in a way that Valentina would never see coming. But just as I felt a flicker of hope, my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. The words made my blood run cold. I know what you're planning. Don't think you can outsmart me. I looked up at Diego, ready to tell him it was nothing, but the street was empty. No one in sight. And yet, in the shadows, I could feel someone watching. Someone who would make sure I paid for every move I dared to make. I couldn't go back to being invisible. Not after what had happened at that dinner. Not after Valentina had paraded my life in front of everyone like it was a trophy she'd won. I realized something important that night. If I wanted justice, if I wanted to reclaim what was mine, I couldn't do it with anger. I had to do it with patience, with strategy, with quiet precision. Diego met me at our usual cafe, his calm presence, a shield against the storm inside me. He didn't ask questions. He just slid into the seat across from me and let me breathe. You're ready, he said quietly, as if reading my thoughts. Ready to take control. I nodded, because I knew he was right. I started small, subtle changes in my life. Standing taller, speaking with clarity, showing up where I'd once stayed invisible. But the real work was in watching, listening, learning. Valentina's arrogance made her predictable. The flick of her wrist when she was impatient, the way her eyes darted when she thought no one was looking, the smug way she assumed Martine would always side with her. I cataloged every weakness, every crack in her carefully polished mask. And then I began planting the first threads of what would become her undoing. A casually overheard conversation, a tiny misstep in front of family, subtle reminders of loyalty I knew Diego and I could exploit later. Each day, the tension grew, not in my voice, but in the space around me. But the real escalation came when I spotted her across the street one evening, talking on her phone with a smile that hid nothing. My stomach twisted. She wasn't just unaware. She was plotting, scheming, always one step ahead, and I knew she would stop at nothing to control everything. I leaned back, taking a quiet breath. The first move had been made. The pieces were set. And in the shadows, I saw him. Or maybe it was her. A figure lingering just beyond the cafe window, watching me. Waiting. I didn't flinch. I could feel it in my bones. This war had begun. And this time, I wouldn't let her win. The days after that cafe meeting passed in a strange rhythm. Quiet, calculated, but charged with tension. I watched Valentina from a distance, noting every careless smile, every boastful word she let slip. Every move she made confirmed what I already knew. Arrogance was her greatest weakness. And while she thrived on attention, I began thriving in shadows. Quietly, I was building myself into something unshakable. Diego and I grew closer in those days, not with grand gestures, but in small, steady ways. He listened while I spoke in half-formed sentences about my plans, my fears, my rage. He didn't judge. He didn't rush. He just understood. And in that understanding, I found strength I hadn't realized I had. One evening, we walked through the quiet streets, the city lights reflecting off wet pavement. He stopped, turning to face me. You've changed, he said softly. Stronger than anyone I've ever known. Not just brave, unstoppable. I looked at him, unsure where this was going. And then he took my hand. I've waited my whole life for someone like you. Someone who doesn't just survive, someone who fights in silence and wins. Isabella, will you marry me? It wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, but it carried the weight of years, of loyalty, of shared understanding. I nodded, tears threatening but unshed. Yes, the news rippled through my family the next day. Martin's jaw went slack. Valentina's composure cracked in a microsecond, just enough to reveal the storm beneath her surface. She tried to mask it with a forced smile, but I saw her calculating mind whirring, realizing she had lost control. And in that moment, I felt it. The power of being quiet, unseen, but completely unstoppable. Every glance toward Valentina, every whisper I overheard reminded me the game had begun. But her eyes followed me everywhere, and I knew one thing for certain. She was planning her counterattack, and I wasn't ready for it yet. The morning after the engagement announcement, the house felt different, quieter, but tense in a way you could almost touch. Even my parents, caught between pride and confusion, started noticing the shift between Valentina and me. It wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, but every glance, every pause at the table carried a weight I had never felt before. Valentina was careful, at first. A sharp comment about my choice of dress, a joke about my new relationship with Diego, each one veiled in sweetness but dripping with challenge. She wanted a reaction, and for the first few moments, I felt that familiar rush of anger. My fingers itched to snap, to correct her in front of everyone, to remind her that I wasn't invisible. But I didn't. Instead, I smiled softly, nodded politely, and let the words hang in the air, powerless against me. Every small attack she made, I recorded in my mind, the tone, the timing, the look in her eyes when she expected me to flinch. Each one became a thread I could pull later, a subtle mark of leverage I was quietly collecting. Even Martin noticed the tension, but he didn't comment. He had already lost control of the narrative, and I could see the unease in his careful glances. Diego, of course, saw it all, but he never interfered. He trusted me to move on my own, to gather my strength without rushing. By the evening, whispers had started circulating in the family. Questions about why Valentina was suddenly so cold, why I seemed serene, where she expected anger. Every small remark I made, every calm smile became another quiet reminder. I was no longer a passive player in her game. And as I retreated to the quiet of my room that night, the thought settled in my chest like fire. She thinks she's testing me, but the truth is, the longer she pushes, the stronger I become. And somewhere, in the silence outside my window, I sensed her watching. Waiting, calculating. The war wasn't just beginning. It was already underway. The garden smelled of white lilies and fresh-cut grass, sunlight spilling across the small gathering in golden streams. It was intimate, exactly the way Diego and I had wanted it. A handful of friends, close family, and a few cousins who knew the real story were scattered among the wooden chairs, their smiles quiet but genuine. I walked down the aisle slowly, feeling every step as if it were mine alone, carrying the weight of months of humiliation and heartache. Diego waited at the end, calm and steady, his eyes locked on mine. In that moment, I felt untouchable, a quiet power thrumming beneath the surface. The ceremony was soft, simple, beautiful. Our vows whispered, heartfelt, unhurried. Every word I spoke, every glance I gave Diego, reinforced that I had reclaimed my life. I wasn't just a victim of Valentina's schemes anymore. I was present. I was alive. I was in control. Yet even as we exchanged rings, I could feel tension in the air, a subtle awareness among the guests that something was about to shift. Whispers of anticipation flickered like candlelight. They didn't know it yet, but a storm was coming, one that would break the fragile calm of this perfect day. Diego squeezed my hand, his touch grounding me. I smiled, calm and confident. Today was ours. The rest, whatever came next, would have to catch up. And somewhere beyond the sunlit walls of the garden, shadows moved, carrying the sense of someone about to arrive who would test every ounce of control I had claimed. The quiet before the storm was absolute. The quiet of the garden shattered in an instant. A sharp commotion at the entrance drew every eye as Valentina appeared, her dress stretched tight over the unmistakable curve of her pregnancy. She stormed in, face blazing with fury, and the polished smile she always wore for others was gone. "You!" she screamed, pointing directly at me. "You knew I loved him. You married him just to get revenge. How could you?" Gasps rippled through the guests. Utter shock froze the crowd in place. Forks hovered mid-air, whispered questions died on lips, and all eyes turned to the sisters' confrontation. Martin's face went pale, as if the air itself had been knocked out of him. Diego remained calm, steady as a rock, hand finding mine in reassurance. He didn't speak, didn't intervene, just stood beside me, an unshakable presence that allowed me to breathe, allowed me to remain in control. I didn't answer her. I let her words hang in the air, jagged and sharp, while I stayed calm, letting the tension rise naturally. Every scream, every accusation, only emphasized her desperation and my silent dominance. The guests could feel it, their eyes flicking between us, hearts racing, waiting to see if I would crack or retaliate. Valentina's voice rose again, trembling now, a mix of anger and fear. "You think you can humiliate me and win? You think you can take him from me?" I stayed silent, letting the silence itself speak louder than any words could. The power of restraint, the weight of calm confidence, began to shift the room. Even as her fury spilled over, the guests' attention subtly realigned. Isabella wasn't shrinking. She was standing her ground, unseen but unshakable. And as Valentina's glare locked onto me, the tension reached its peak. Every heartbeat in the garden seemed to stretch into eternity. Everyone, the family, the friends, the stunned onlookers, was waiting for the next move. And I knew, with a cold certainty, that my move was coming. But not yet. The garden fell deathly silent. Valentina's anger crackled like electricity. But I stepped forward, calm, deliberate, every movement measured. The sun caught my ring, the white flowers framing me like armor, and I let the hush of the crowd carry my presence. I think it's time the truth is told, I said, voice steady, eyes locked on Valentina. The words sliced through the tension, drawing every gaze to me. Her glare sharpened, but I didn't flinch. Your pregnancy. It wasn't an accident, was it? I continued, letting the words hang in the air. It was a manipulation, a plan to control, to humiliate, to corner me into whatever you wanted. But I anticipated it. I expected it, and it doesn't work. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Valentina's lips quivered. Her eyes flicked to Diego. I let that silence stretch. Diego never loved you, I said. Not then. Not now. He rejected you years ago, and every attempt to rewrite that truth has failed. And Martín, he came to me, quietly, asking me to return after your announcement. I declined, calmly, privately, because I know my own worth. The murmurs of shock grew louder. I let the tension build, letting everyone in the garden feel it. Valentina's carefully constructed mask began to crack. And there's more, I said, turning to the rest of the family. Your manipulations, the whispers, the lies you've told to paint me as the villain. Everyone here knows the truth now. Every secret you tried to hide is exposed by your own arrogance. The crowd went still, faces pale, mouths open. Valentina's fists clenched. Her fury had nowhere to land. I took a deep breath, letting the silence sink in. I didn't need to shout. I didn't need to fight. My dignity, my love, my life, they were intact. I had anticipated every move, stayed calm when chaos tried to shake me, and now the victory was complete, silent, absolute, undeniable. Valentina's storm had arrived, and she had only revealed herself. Diego squeezed my hand, quiet pride in his eyes. I smiled softly, letting the moment linger. The war was over. I had won, without raising my voice, without breaking my poise. If you loved this twist, and want more jaw-dropping stories of betrayal, revenge, and unexpected truths, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, because the next story could change everything.